Professor Namyong Lee's long commentary, The Essence of Knowledge is Relationship, and when we lose relationship, humans become slaves of AI. When relationships are severed, knowledge collapses. Knowledge is not a warehouse of facts, but a network of connections among things, people, and rules. Mathematics is a system that precisely handles the relationship between operands and operators, and language is a system that decomposes and reassembles the world through the relationship between nouns and verbs. Theology interprets the relationship between humans and God, and philosophy defines the relationship between human beings. Science is a system that captures and reproduces the relationships between things through measurement and experiment. In one sentence, knowledge is the ability to identify relationships, verify relationships, and apply relationships. What is more dangerous in the age of AI is not a lack of knowledge, but the loss of relational sense. AI can imitate relationships with plausible sentences, but it cannot bear the responsibility of relationships on our behalf. The responsibility of relationships means separating cause from effect, distinguishing assumptions from observations, and tracing to the end who receives benefits and who bears harm. When we abandon this tracing, knowledge turns into belief, belief is absorbed into agitation, and agitation ultimately builds the nation's lives as a cost. A society with low-quality knowledge inevitably produces incompetence and corruption. Ignorant citizens are easy to deceive, incompetent organizations repeat the same failures, and greedy groups profit by selling certainty instead of verification. Enlightenment is not the act of piling up difficult words, it is the act of restoring the eyes that can see relationships. Citizens who cannot see relationships are always swayed by facial expressions and slogans, and in the end, they surrender sovereignty over their own lives. A definition of knowledge through relationship is needed. The definition of knowledge should be simple. Knowledge is the act of organizing relationships among objects into rules. Objects may be numbers, words, or human beings, or they may be institutions or organizations. Relationships may be operations, grammar, contracts, or flows of power and responsibility. Knowledge is ultimately the act of fixing these relationships into forms such as language, mathematics, and institutions so that anyone can use them repeatedly. When knowledge is defined in terms of relationships, its boundaries become clear. Facts and opinions are separated, and what can be verified is separated from what cannot. Knowledge with a right answer must have relationships that can be measured, reproduced, and falsified. Knowledge without a right answer includes choices of values and ethics within relationships, so it requires social agreement and the design of accountability. If we fail to make this distinction, we will turn science into politics and try to turn ethics into mathematics, and we will ruin both. A relational definition strengthens a nation. The moment we ask who is in what relationship with what, falsehood becomes difficult to hide, interests are exposed, accountability becomes traceable, and free certainty disappears. When free certainty disappears, society finally begins to accumulate real knowledge. A society where the hierarchy of hypothesis and theory collapses is dangerous. Knowledge has hypotheses and theories. A hypothesis is unverified knowledge. A theory is verified knowledge. The moment we blur this distinction, rumors, conspiracy theories, and propaganda take the place of knowledge. There is a gulf as wide as heaven and earth between a claim that merely sounds plausible and a claim that is actually correct. A hypothesis must disclose its conditions. It must specify under what assumptions which relationship is said to hold. If these assumptions are hidden, the hypothesis becomes fraud. A theory, by contrast, comes with conditions and limits. It must be able to say where it holds and where it does not. A theory that cannot speak of its limits does not remain a theory. It degenerates into doctrine. In the age of AI, the speed at which hypotheses are mass-produced explodes. Generative AI produces vast quantities of sentences before verification, so hypotheses are easily consumed as if they were conclusions. What citizens must do is simple. Ask whether it is a hypothesis or a theory, and if it is a hypothesis, confirm what the verification path is. If there is no verification, stop consuming it. Citizens who do not stop become fixed customers of the deception industry. Knowledge creation is the discovery and structuring of relationships. Knowledge creation begins first with discovering relationships. From observation, experience, and cases, we find what is connected to what. Second, we structure relationships. We express connections as rules so that others can apply them in the same way. Third, we explain relationships. We present mechanisms for why such relationships hold. Fourth, we use relationships for prediction. We predict what outcomes will occur and then revise our understanding based on results. The creation of mathematics is a case of making relationships extremely precise. It defines the relationship between operands and operators and builds axioms and theorems to secure reproducibility. The creation of language is a technique for decomposing the world. The clearer the relationship between nouns and verbs, the more accurately sentences can capture the world. The creation of science is the act of grasping relationships through observation and experiment, fixing measurable relationships first. Philosophy and theology follow the same principle. Philosophy defines norms and responsibilities within the relationship between humans, and theology interprets existence, salvation, and ethics within the relationship between humans and God. The difference lies in verification methods. Science verifies through experiments and reproducibility. Philosophy verifies through logical consistency and counterexamples, and theology verifies through the rigor of revelation, tradition, and interpretation. Different verification methods do not make something non-knowledge. Evading verification is the enemy of knowledge. Verification is the procedure that turns relationship from violence into science. Verification is the lifeline of knowledge. Verification is the procedure that distinguishes whether a relationship is real or fake, and the fairer that procedure is, the stronger knowledge becomes. Without verification, relationships are enforced by power, and enforced relationships lead society toward oppression. The history of knowledge is the history of institutionalizing verification to reduce the arbitrariness of power. Verification has basic disciplines. First, definitions must be clear. Second, measurement must be possible. Third, counterexamples must be allowed. Fourth, reproducibility must be possible under the same conditions. Fifth, failures must be recorded and lead to correction. Without these five, verification becomes a show. When a show becomes the face of knowledge, society eventually falls behind, even if it possesses technology. Verification must be stricter in the age of AI. AI can quickly present statistical relationships, but it does not guarantee causal relationships. If we confuse correlation with causation, individuals collapse in investing and health, organizations collapse in strategy and security, and nations suffer fatal blows in policy and national security. Citizens who do not verify relationships ultimately become citizens who entrust their lives to others. Application is the final gate that turns knowledge into value. Knowledge is completed in application. Knowledge in the head is not an asset but a possibility. Only applied knowledge creates productivity, safety, and trust. The core of application is the ability to choose knowledge that fits the nature of the problem. Problems with right answers require measurement, standards, and procedures, while problems without right answers require value choices and the design of accountability. Structured problems are domains fixed and repeated by rules and procedures. In these domains, it is right to standardize verified relationships and automate them. Semi-structured problems can be handled partly by calculation, but final judgment and responsibility remain. In these domains, AI should provide computation, while humans set criteria and fix appeals and explainability as institutions. Unstructured problems involve many stakeholders, multi-layered goals, and delayed results. In these domains, we must abandon single solutions and operate with scenarios and options. A representative disease that ruins application is the circulation of counterfeit knowledge. It is the practice of selling unverified hypotheses as if they were theories, packaging short-term results as long-term truth, and distributing sensational certainty as if it were knowledge. This market grows because citizens do not want to pay the cost of verification. Citizens who save on verification costs end up paying a far larger cost of damage. Cases are needed to explain knowledge as relationship. The mathematical case is simple. When we define the relationship between operands and operators, results follow automatically. Just as changing the relationship between addition and multiplication changes the entire mathematical system, the definition of relationship is the skeleton of knowledge. Verification here is carried out through axiomatic consistency and provability. That is why mathematics is both the art of relationship and the discipline of relationship. The linguistic case is also clear. The more accurate the relationship between nouns and verbs, the better sentences reflect reality. When the relationship between subject and predicate collapses, sentences become lumps of emotion and meaning wavers. Verification in language appears in the rate of misunderstanding and the consistency of interpretation in real communication. A good language reduces misunderstanding, and a language with increasing misunderstanding is a language with blurred relationships. The cases of theology and philosophy connect directly to the human inner life and community. In theology, how we understand the relationship between humans and God changes sin, salvation, and ethics. In philosophy, how we define relationships between humans changes rights, duties, and justice. The scientific case is the relationship between things. When we understand the relationship of gravity, the universe opens. When we understand the relationship of electrons, semiconductors open. In the end, all fields advance by defining relationships, verifying relationships, and applying relationships. Knowledge hygiene in the AI age is the habit of tracing relationships to the end. Knowledge hygiene in the AI age consists of 3 habits. First, the habit of checking whether something is a hypothesis or a theory. Second, the habit of distinguishing whether a relationship is correlation or causation. Third, the habit of tracing who benefits from the relationship and who is forced to pay the cost. Without these 3, citizens become ruled by sentences, dragged by algorithms, and finally give up sovereignty over their lives. The core of civic enlightenment is not teaching difficult words, but restoring the ability to see relationships. Society becomes healthy when citizens separate cause from effect, distinguish assumptions from observations, and demand verification procedures. Conversely, the more citizens find verification bothersome and prefer certainty, the more easily fraudsters, agitators, and incompetent powers flourish. Knowledge is ultimately relationship. Relationship is fixed by definition, explored as hypothesis, verified as theory, and turned into value through application. The moment this order is broken, knowledge collapses. And in a society where knowledge has collapsed, AI becomes not a blessing but a trap. Only citizens who grasp relationships can make AI a tool, and only citizens who are not dragged by AI can secure both success and survival. Thank you for watching Professor Namyong Lee's long commentary.